So, but was there anything unique in your examination? And by the way, Dennis Smith was one of my professors. I miss him dearly.
Thank you. Public hearings are kind of the default way of having public participation, pretty much everywhere, pretty much. I think Canada is better in general than the U.S. actually. They have a greater tradition of public participation, and I think there was some examples of that. People want to come in out of the cold. I hadn't thought of that. You're right. But in general, we don't do public participation well. So I have nothing particularly unique about that. I do want to say something, and just bear with me, about how it is that public hearings are, how public participation is done here in the MTA. But we'll get back to that, if you could bear with me.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Which has to do with, obviously I attended most of the public hearings pertaining to that tremendous service cut.
Yes.
Nowhere at any of the hearings did it come out, and I don't believe the public was fully aware that the reason for all of those service cuts was the governor's taking of money that had been earmarked for the MTA and putting it into general fund.
Right, of course not.
Obviously the MTA wasn't going to provide that was the reason for the service cuts,
Right.
but should that have come out at the public hearing?
I mean, would it have been better for public discourse if that was known? Yes,
It
absolutely.
seemed like the MTA didn't do this
Of course it would. The question is who would bring it up and how it would happen. I think it's not going to be the MTA that does. It could have been strap hangers that did, and I think they did, actually. So, yeah, it's a travesty. But
We brought it up.
Right.
We brought it up.
Okay.
We brought it up.
you know, at a public hearing, I
I think the
suppose.
public knew it.
No, the public probably didn't know it. And a public hearing at least gives you a large audience if you're on the agenda early. And the news media is there. So it's useful from that point of view. I mean, that's maybe the first thing I've heard that makes a public hearing useful. So here are some of the research questions we were looking at. What effect did MTA public hearings and media reaction during the study period have on public opinion? Were there ways in which the MTA could conduct hearings to more successfully accomplish its public participation goals? Was the media judgmental in its coverage of the MTA, limiting public relations gains that innovative public participation initiatives might otherwise yield? What public participation techniques did MTA leadership and its three major transit operations use? Were those techniques effective? And how did New York area transportation advocacy groups assess the effectiveness of the MTA's public participation efforts? Those are some of the things that we were looking to answer. So one of the things we could, so here's now the findings from our work. Some of them highlight. Many senior MTA officials appeared to be convinced that its public engagement efforts were doomed to failure because of media bias and elected officials' cynical use of the agency as a target. While politicians and the media do have an impact on the public's trust in the MTA, the agency's public participation activities could also have a significant impact on them. That MTA resignation led to missed opportunities to earn public trust and confidence, especially in its approach to public hearings. They were just so cynical about it and so resigned that they weren't trying hard. They just given up. Which only said that became increasingly true after these. And the public hearings only serve as outlets for anger and criticism, and in turn generate negative media coverage. That's what came out of it largely.
In your first
Is your mic on?
in your first thing, can you go back on the screen? Where you
I think
talk
so.
about the agency's public participation goals. What are you assuming its goals are?
Yes, that's a very good question. They were not, we asked about, one of the very first things we asked them in interviews was, what are your public participation goals? And they didn't have an answer. They actually didn't have anything in mind It was whole public, they had to do what the law required them
Well,
to do.
your whole question
But
there,
nobody came.
were there ways in which the MTA could conduct hearings to more successfully accomplish its public participation goals?
Right.
If it didn't have goals, then the whole question.
Well, that's right.
out the
No, this was the
window,
way we
right?
framed the question as we started the research project. What became clear, it's a wonderful question, what became clear as we proceeded was, because that would have been the benchmark, was what are the goals? And they didn't have an answer for us. They actually hadn't articulated it anywhere. So that was revealing in and of itself, obviously, right? The goals for public hearings, A, it met the legal requirements. But B, the measures, to the extent there was any measure of success, it was how many people showed up.
It
But
meant,
actually, they
Can I tell you,
they thought they'd been effective if people came.
I asked a question to which I knew the answer, and
Yes.
that's when I was working at the MTA and conducted these public
Yes.
hearings. The only purpose at that time for conducting public hearings were because they were required by law. And if we couldn't get federal funding, we couldn't get
That's
any
correct.
other
That's
funding. And that was the only goal that we knew of. We tried making, especially with Dick Ravitch, to get more public participation.
Yeah.
It didn't work because the mindset within the MTA
Right.
was, there were no goals.
Right.
And so for you to ask this question, that's why I'm questioning your.
We didn't know there weren't any goals until we asked the question.
Your research questions,
Yeah.
but if your first question is unanswerable, don't the others really stem from that?
Not entirely. We still wanted to know what the media, we had other research questions here. That changed how we might assess, but we had our own notion of what the goals ought to be, so we could assess things based on that. That's what we did. So, we talked about that. We did a content analysis of media coverage. And we found, surprising, to our own surprise, actually, that the media coverage was more even-handed, looking at their headlines and at the content of the articles, than the MTA would have imagined. They were not negative, some were, but they were as much positive press headlines and content as there was negative. We were surprised. But that's what we found. We did exhaustive scanning and content analysis.
Positive of what exactly?
Of
Certainly not of the service cuts coupled
And-
with fairness.
no, but the sense that the MTA was doing the best that it could, that it was not being cynical. That they were under budget pressures, that the money had been taken by the governor, that all those things altered the kind of coverage. This was, a bad set of circumstances. They were doing the best they could. It was necessary. The MTA had reversed some of those things. The headlines were not as unmeasured as we would have thought. And also I thought an important finding. And we recommended, as a consequence, that the MTA give the media more credit and look for ways to provide the media with positive stories about them. That they were not their enemies.
You're talking about meters, but the news people. News people do not really get the right information out because they say one thing and then MTA says a different thing. Even on an example like on a news station, they claim it happened this day, but really happened 2 months ago.
Yep.
The problem is with the news meter, they don't say the fact correctly or what did happen.
Yeah, my own experience actually bears that out. I've been quoted from time to time in the press, and it's never right. So.
Yeah, and it's like the only time they did get it right is when they had the public hearing at the Brooklyn Museum almost 6 years ago.
Right.
I was interviewed by those college students acting like high school students, and I said those college students acted inappropriate, and she had a curse word I did not say. I said inappropriate. She wrote stupidity. I then said, you know what? I'll take it.
Yeah. It happens.
At least the high school students got a fair chance after they had their own public hearing. But as I said, it's crowd control needs to be worked on.
Right. Yeah, it's a big problem.
Yeah.
It's an issue. I agree with you. Okay, here are some additional findings about what were then prevailing practices regarding public participation at the MTA and in the operating units. So here's what we heard from people who came to the public hearings, both in the interviews and in this questionnaire, before and after survey that we did. Here's what we concluded, because it was pretty overwhelming. Most people who come are there because they have an axe to grind. They're fearful of a change, they're upset about it, they're angry, they're frustrated, that's why they're there, and they probably aren't representative of the larger public. But representative to some part of the public, but not necessarily all of it. It's skewed because that's who comes. Many people who spoke had uninformed opinions, didn't even have the facts straight, and afterward, most people who spoke reported being frustrated that their views were not being heard. And they cited as reasons the fact that the board members did not appear to be attentive. Some of them were on their phones while they were speaking, and there was never any response. There was never any reaction that indicated that they'd been listened to, that they had just poured their hearts out and thank you, next. They had no feedback whatsoever, no questions being asked, nothing. Not even disagreement, not even saying, here's the problem with what you said, nothing. And they were terribly frustrated about that. People who reported that they had come to learn because they were concerned about the issue but wanted to find out more about it and didn't have their mind made up in any way were also frustrated because there was no information presented. They didn't hear anything that they thought they could rely upon.
Let me just say that as someone that's gone to tons of these hearings, what the MTA usually does is they don't want the people sitting up on the dais to respond to people, because then if someone isn't responded to, they feel like they weren't.
Right.
That doesn't stop some board members from speaking out. But normally they have tables in the back.
Yes.
Where you can interact and get information.
Correct.
Was this survey cognizant with the fact that there is a whole host of information outside the room for people to get?
Well, we certainly knew that.
But the public
was the public aware of that? Well, maybe at the very beginning of the hearing, they were told that there were those tables in the back. It was never repeated, I know. It was never mentioned again.
It was mentioned at each adjournment, basically. You know, when there's a...
Right, whoever was left in the room. So it was said at the beginning, the house wasn't full yet. People keep coming, they have no idea. And then it's mentioned at the end and no one's there at that point. I mean,
now, if there's a break, it's mentioned, but then people don't stay, they don't stay.
Right. Yes, but
I was just going to point out, what I heard about the tables from people who were just there attending is because of the design of the process, they were just sort of they were a sidecar. They weren't really part of the process. And it's like, this is the main thing is testifying at the public hearing, oh yeah, we have some people from the agency.
Right.
You just want to blow off some steam with them, but it won't matter because they're
That's
just
right.
people from the agencies.
That's right. That's right, exactly. There was, continuing, there was no opportunity for dialogue or deliberation. Obviously, that's just not part of a public hearing process. And people suspected that the hearing is pro forma, that the decisions have already been made. I mean, this is a horror. And then, of course, you get negative media coverage, and now the public who didn't attend only sees that negativity, and that people were angry and upset. Another part of prevailing practices, we found that the operating unit's approaches to public engagement differed greatly. They and headquarters, we felt, and we recommended, would benefit from sharing and being open to learning from the other's experience. We saw ways in which Long Island Railroad could benefit from knowing what Metro North was doing and vice versa, and we encouraged that to happen. I have no idea if any of that has happened. In general, we felt that the operating units were more successful at public participation than was headquarters. The technique used most frequently cited by the operating units was going to meetings of local institutions and organizations. They found that to be very effective. I would have If they hadn't been doing it, I'd have been recommending it, so I thought that was terrific. And all 3 operating units rated that as very useful, appropriately so. So that was great. So you'll know more about this than I because I don't know what's happened since. But at the time when we were doing this research, we encouraged headquarters to find ways to use the standardization of metrics, which apparently was something that was happening, as a vehicle for more mutual learning among the entities, but we recommended that public participation not be overly controlled and standardized. That each operating unit has different challenges, types of media outlets to deal with, serves different populations, and therefore they ought to have some discretion about their choice of public participation strategies. But we felt that the standardization of metrics was a rubric under which more sharing would take place amongst the agencies. That was what our recommendation was. I have no idea where that's gone. We don't need to talk about that today because you know more about it than I. We also found that the public participation functions that I identified earlier, educating the public, facilitating public deliberation, which would ordinarily require charrettes or workshops, some kind of interactive small group process, that those and closing the loop, 3 of the 6, were generally weak throughout the MTA system, as they generally are everywhere. Nothing unique about that. We felt that these strategies, I'm sorry, it says 2, but it says 3. These 3 strategies probably represent the best opportunities for making a long-term difference in the public's belief about and attitudes toward the agency. Educating the public, not just the basic information, but a deeper level of education. Facilitating public deliberation and closing the loop. Staff at the operating units consistently told us that they did not have, we asked them whether they did public participation plans when a decision was pending, something was happening, there was a new station improvement, whatever it was going to be. Did they develop a public participation plan before they embarked upon engagement with the public? And they consistently said no, they didn't have the resources and the time to do that. They were winging it, and they admitted it, because they just didn't have the time or the resources to actually sit down and make up a plan. Not that that needs to take so much time, but they weren't doing that. And to us that was stunning, because developing such plans, including strategies for engaging the media, bringing them along to see something, giving them visuals, helping them see what the agency was trying to do, are generally considered critical to effective public engagement, and that should be supported with adequate resources. So the idea of public engagement or public participation plans.
So,
yeah,
putting out something like this that they have done, does that meet their qualifications of what you were recommending? It's on the website, it came out as a press release explaining what they were looking to do with their proposal?
I haven't seen it, so perhaps. But and that's
It's 2 options for this next.
yeah. So that's good. I mean, that's good. I mean, I confess not to have looked at that. Putting it up on the website may or may not be enough to start. But this is an internal document as much as it is a public. This is how are we going to approach public participation during the course of this project? What's the media? How do we reach the media? Who are the affected stakeholders? We haven't had a meeting with the usual suspects, but are there some other stakeholder groups we need to make special efforts to reach out to because they don't usually come, don't know, and they're chronically underrepresented? Well, what do we do about them? You need a plan to do that. And they, at least in 2009-10, they consistently did not do plans before they started their work.
Alan?
I think that's a major recommendation.
One thing that, it's getting annoying also when they do bring this out, they don't show what the reduced fare price is.
Right.
It's annoying after a while. Since this came out, everybody's like asking, how much is the half fare? Now we have to get out their calculators and then put it in.
Yes.
Like, you have 2 proposals. What is proposal A? What's proposal, right now, proposal B, if B goes up to $3, is it going to be $1.50 or is it going another 10 cents? we need, to seniors and disabled.
Sure.
And it's really affecting, you know, a
Sure.
lot of people.
And people need to have that information, because otherwise they're gonna go to public hearings, be totally misinformed, speak nonsense because they don't know what the information is, they'll feel embarrassed about it, the whole, you know, it's a fiasco. So I agree with you, that people need that information. Yes, please.
It comes back down to the fact that the MTA can't be bothered giving us information and including us in the discussion. It's one line. It's going to kill it. And I think that it's just very, it says something about the MTA's attitude
Correct.
to reduce fare individuals.
Yeah.
And I think it's very disdainful, and it is part of an entire headset
Yes,
that needs to be resolved.
no question.
And it's not going to be resolved with the current administration. Thank you.
Yes? Two, I think this is the last one, about findings. So we noted at the time, and it was really the very early days of social media, boy, right? I mean, we had no idea then what we were even talking about. But the MTA, we thought, should continue to explore ways to use social media and new technology to engage and educate the public. It's unrealistic to expect large numbers of busy people to attend meetings, so you don't get a representative sample of the public. We recommended finding convenient onboard, on-platform ways to educate riders about issues and elicit their preferences. Some of that may be happening. And we noted, as a recommendation, I hope you'll be gratified to see this, we noted that the PCAC was an underutilized resource. And I'm delighted to have been here on the day that the new budget was announced with everything that you've worked so hard to get, because we think that that is enormously important. We specifically noted that the PCAC should be supported in doing more quantitative and qualitative research and analysis, of which we thought they were capable, and that this would be important, that it's not just complaints, that there was actually data being developed from an independent perspective. We felt very strongly about that. We noted it. There it is, for what it's worth. But you got your budget. That's a step. I congratulate you on that, really do. Okay, public hearings. Let's come back to public hearings. So this may surprise you, and I have to confess that I think I'm right about this. I'm not 100% certain, but it is what I believe to be the case. The legal requirements for public participation are: provide adequate notice of certain projects and policy changes that meet certain criteria, right, have to be of a certain magnitude, provide opportunity for public comment on the record, and provide adequate notice of those opportunities, and to consider the received comments in the decision-making process. That is what the law requires. It does not say you have to have public hearings. Anything that meets those criteria is an acceptable modality for satisfying the legal requirements of the federal government with regard to public participation. You as an agency has to file with the FTA, FHA, what its default mechanism will be. What is its official choice for a public participation process? And what the MTA has chosen is public hearings. It is not required by law.
Is there any operator in the United States that's chosen a different
I don't know.
method?
We could probably find out, but I don't know.
That'd be interesting.
I can't cite them, but I've heard of places where they don't do public hearings. They do different. You know, they put people. They put you know, tables and stations. They have people walking up and down buses or walking. You know, meeting people on bus stops.
But for a fair increase, I think public hearings. I'm not sure. I think public hearings are required.
I believe if there is federal funding involved in any way.
No.
If there's federal funding involved, you now have to meet the federal criteria, which are providing notice, providing opportunity to comment on the record, and to take those comments into account. That's what the law requires. It does not say have public hearings. But most agencies adopt public hearings as their default. That's the official choice. So when an issue comes up, that's what you have to do. Because you said so. But it doesn't have to be that way. This is a revelation. I invite you all to check this out.
No, it's in the regulations. It does not say public hearings.
Right.
It says public, gathering public input.
Isn't there an assumption made that if there is no definition of what public participation is, that it means hearings, it means...
Not that I'm aware of.
So, Sean,
that's,
how are you putting a
I
comment
read
on the
that,
record?
We're going to talk about it.
I read that as intentionally being flexible.
Yeah,
I don't think
this
so.
is not understood. It's assumed by everybody that public hearings are what you have to do. It's not true. I invite you to check it out.
But I don't know, I think.
It is true at the moment for the MTA because that's what they filed.
I'm not sure about state law, but I know that there are requirements for public hearings in state law on certain things, which the MTA would have to follow. And, I mean, you could change state law and say,
Right.
and make
Correct.
it, and match that, which
Yeah.
might be something.
It's right. I'm
you wanna
only
do.
referring to federal requirements when federal
Right,
money is involved.
and-
It may be that the state requires public hearings. I don't know.
And the public authorities.
But you could meet that test. You could do public hearings
And do this, yes, the MTA
to
doesn't,
do other
doesn't
things.
say
And I want to talk about what the other things could be that might just to expand our sense of possibilities.
The FTA seems to be totally web-based. You know, they put out a notice, you've got a deadline, you can, respond by mail, by email, by fax. Quite often, there are no public
Exactly.
meetings at all for FTA. I only know this because I put it on my events list.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Requests for comments.
Exactly. So, check it out, because this opens up a world of possibilities. So here's an alternative strategy that I submit for your consideration. First, an overview. So, if you continue to have a requirement of a public hearing, because that's what it is now, no one says you have to have a public hearing in every borough and in every county you serve. You could have one, and that would satisfy the legal requirement. Here's what I would propose. Have an effective, meaningful public involvement process before any public hearing. Now, when Jay Walder was here, and then it was a new set of, I guess that was the 2010 hearings. Because of the work we'd already done, and because of the work I did with Lee in 2007, which I haven't talked about yet, we went, and Dennis and I went and met with him. And we said, because what happened in 2007, we just know, that there were a round of public hearings, they were scheduled, it was all arranged, and then I think Lee said, let's do something else. Let's supplement that with a public workshop, which I would describe. The public workshop occurred after all the public hearings. Our point of view was, given the new opportunity that was arising in 2010, do a round of public workshops throughout the region. One in every borough, one in every town. Do a round of public workshops, provide opportunities for comment on the record at those workshops at a table in the back. Satisfy, and if you want to have a public hearing just to tie up all the loose ends and not be subject to any public criticism, have one. So the goal of that strategy is to have all the issues aired and addressed interactively and creatively. In my estimation and experience, people will be largely satisfied by having been taken seriously and engaged in a meaningful way, even if the outcome turns out not to be what they say they wanted. That's the grudging acceptance I referred to before. And perhaps overstating the case, I would argue that a good public hearing may be one to which no one comes. And I would submit that if you've done the public outreach and the public participation process well, that's what would happen. People who might otherwise want to come to a public hearing will have another venue. Just as convenient, it'll be more meaningful. They say, gee, I never understood that aspect of the problem. I take it all back. Or, well, I still think with respect to the questions you posed for us that are meaningful, open opportunities for input, questions you haven't resolved yet. You know, in the workshop in 2007, there was the issue of whether fares would be raised, which was a non-issue. They were going to be raised. There wasn't much to debate, and you could rail all you wanted to. Well, we're poor, we don't have the money, this is terrible. The fares were going to get raised.
There were several options.
And that's the point. There were several options about how to raise that revenue. How would it be allocated between the railroads and transit? What kinds of discounted fares?
And the passes.
Exactly. And what we did in that workshop was say, look, here's the problem. The problem is we're running out of money. We need to have a fare, we need to raise this kind of revenue or have service cuts. We proposed, no, we weren't doing that. In 2007, they said, you know, we could, that's the alternative, but that's the dilemma we are faced with. But there were different ways we could do this, and we want your input about that because we're not sure. It's a values question, it's not a technical, we want your input. And people said they really want our input about it. These are open questions, they're real questions. And they got focused on that. The issue of the fare increase fell to the wayside. That's what good public engagement does by understanding what's real, what's meaningful, and giving people an opportunity to think about that, and talk about that, and work it through, and then weigh in. And they were thrilled with it. People who came to that workshop, I'll tell the same more about the workshop. Yes, please.
As somebody that attended the workshops, one, they were really informative because they had a piece where they talked about the operating budget. But then at each of the round tables, they had a topic that they wanted you to discuss. And what was terrific was you had riders at the table, you had elected officials or their aides represented, you had advocates, you had people that just wanted to learn more about the system. Like this army of people that had an opportunity at these tables to discuss a series of questions and then answer a bunch of things, and then they moved on to, they'd have another time where people could learn. I mean, people really enjoyed the learning part about it. And then discussed. I mean, it was a.
Yeah, I want to discuss it in some greater detail.
Yeah.
Than that. But yes, that's exactly right.
My recollection.
So, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So, workshops are one of the things that one should certainly consider in this regard. For example, for MTA-wide issues, fare increases, as an example, hold workshops through the region before any public hearing. And this is. Let me skip to the particulars because, well, no, this is important. So at the beginning of each segment, there were segments. The first part was general overview of the MTA finances. Each segment of presentation was 15 minutes max, because that's all people can listen to and take in. 15 minutes on that particular subtopic. And then say, here are the questions we would like you to think about in the small groups. People are sitting at small round tables. You know, it's like 8 people, 10 people. And then a facilitator at each table who managed that discussion so it stayed on point and was fruitful and people weren't bored and feeling this was a waste of time. And then there were questions at the end, a worksheet to fill out about what you concluded from this discussion, from the presentation and the discussion. One of the questions on the worksheet was, what did you just learn from the presentation and from the discussion?